Hello, everyone, to the new episode of 10 Minutes of Wisdom. Today is a very special episode for me because I was able to get Sasha in this episode. I have been in my career trying very long to work with him. This is a good, I think, I'm happy to have this conversation with him. So, Sasha is already is like a security leader in like he has held management positions in security teams like for Australian Post, Fitbit, LinkedIn, Microsoft, CBA. Boy, if I could have that career. So so yeah, but so that's so in this podcast, basically, I was very intrigued. Like Sasha also knows, I'm very intrigued about his Fitbit experience because in Fitbit he was the CISO before pre-IPO days, I think, and he had to take on the IoT space and the security challenges about it. So over to you, Sasha. Do you want to discuss a little bit about your experience with Fitbit and IoT security there?
Sure. Yeah, why not? Look, thanks for having me on. And I think this is a great thing you're doing, Vinell.
Thanks.
I wish the whole podcast thing, all the best.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. So I was there pre-IPO at Fitbit, and I think in your invitation, actually, you mentioned that quite astutely there around 2015 at the time, or January 2015, there kind of were no other companies or technologies in this space. In fact, I believe my boss and the CEO invented the whole notion of using a
Spot
a
on.
gyrometer,
Yeah,
gyro
yeah.
to
Oh, yeah.
measure that. And yeah, so I went over there as the first security person. And so not only was it a cultural thing, moving from Australia to San Francisco, the epicenter of tech and everything. So I think Silicon Valley, the sitcom was on at the same time, so it was kind of, I was living the same life. But it was for the purpose of this podcast, the experience was great. When I first got there, there's probably three things I had in my mind, well, that I could speak about now in hindsight. But yeah, getting into an IoT company, it's all about product. And if you're lucky, you've got a service model associated with that. So product means you've got deadlines and you've got customers, and particularly if it's a consumer, you build products to consumer purchasing, patterns, Black Friday, Christmas. So everything's geared up for that type of approach in a product like this, a company like that. And so, we had, obviously, coming in as the first security person, there were going to be gaps.
Yeah.
And so we had to, the analogy of change the tires while the bus is still going. So
Yep.
the expectation of fixing things quickly, you need to be quite patient. But also what I found is the probably clarifying and the capability or scope of what a security team can do in that type of environment. I definitely knew, and the whole company did. The priority was like with the cloud, assets that were on the internet, etc. And I think I got a perception that was going to be primarily the type of work that what the team's going to do with some corporate IT stuff. But it was, and obviously that was the first priority to knock off those two things. However, what eventuates in the whole product life cycle is that's opportunities for where security teams can actually, one, not integrate, but certainly point out there are value adds at, way back in the SDLC, perhaps in locations or, in areas that weren't considered traditional. So with that, what comes with hardware comes, there's abilities to counterfeit it and fraudulent use of cloud and all of that stuff. So it's important not only to, protect those logical assets, but, digital assets, but then those type of things and events, customer support, that whole life cycle affects revenue to the company. And so there's other points the team, I guess, had to jump into very quickly.
So that time, sorry, I'm just diverging here, but that time
Sure.
payments and everything were also done. Was there in the market, or it was just into fitness when you were there?
It was just into fitness, and we were just moving into payments by, putting certain tokens into secure element on
Yeah.
Fitbits.
Yeah.
And that was when, we were chasing Apple for
Yeah.
parity.
Okay.
And then they kind of,
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
inevitably kind of took away. So yes, we were into payments, and obviously we had a commerce site, you could buy all that stuff from.
Yep. So IoT security, how different, or this smart gadgets security or IoT security, how do you feel it's different from your enterprise security perspective? Because you
Yeah,
have
so I guess,
experience of both.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, what I mentioned at the start, that the product focus. So there's a
Mm.
customer, there's timelines,
Yep. Yep.
uh,
Yep.
non-negotiables to deliveries that, sometimes you can extend out in a corporate enterprise way, but also the diversity of technology
Mhm.
and everything you're dealing with, from research, development,
Mhm.
technology, to the cloud stuff. So
Mhm.
putting that all together
Mhm.
as even just as an individual, is quite a lot to consume. I was fortunate that, just given my, when I was born,
Mhm.
that computers back in my day were more like IoT devices. And in fact, Eric
Yeah.
Friedman, who invented the Fitbit, was like, it is the 1970s computing device on your wrist. And
Mhm.
but that shouldn't be underestimated, how complex and all that can be. And just most IoT devices kind of have a superpower. That's
Yep.
their purpose. And
Mhm.
so you'll have to have some specialization
Mhm.
around, those, what sensors they may be using,
Yes.
the locations that they're going to be used in, the power consumption, memory requirements, and all these type of things. They constrain
Mhm.
uh, and direct where you have to go with security.
Oh, nice. So getting
Yeah,
getting
and that's
resources with that skill sets that time would be a bit difficult, right? Now, at least.
correct, actually. And I think one of your questions led me to think about this. Is resources. One thing I was fortunate. One part of the success was to hire quite an amazing team quite quickly.
Nice.
In San Francisco at the time was very hard, and we certainly weren't paying a first tier type of compensation. Uh, and so I had to, as a CISO, it's quite often that you dip into your network of peers,
Yep.
and that was awesome. So I was able to, one recommendation is hiring just in groups of 2 to 4, like small. Don't go big, hire
Mhm.
slowly, and also, I was fortunate to have people with very one, complementary skills, but also overlapping.
Ah,
So
okay.
one thing, I would recommend now is, I don't know, the world's different, business is different, market's different, but having people with, you know, diverse skill set interests me, where I had, product security people that could do incident response. I had incident response
Nice.
people who could do product security.
Yep.
And so that gave me a very efficient, high performing team, because we were small but
Mm.
quite capable. We could do, eventually, once I hired about 4 or 5 people, we
Mm.
could cover every part of information security, from compliance, audit,
Mm.
to full on incident response, fraud, hardware security, and everything. And one thing, though, that happens, and I guess that's a warning, that for me now, to deconflict, that it creates a culture in your team,
Yep.
because the CISO, the leader, brings in people they know. There's already a built relationship,
Mm.
and I noticed as I was building that team that this was kind of, it's not fractious at all, but
Yeah.
there are two kinds of teams almost, and there are old jokes that I know and other friends know. Nonetheless, the point being is just to recognize that when you're doing
Yep.
that, and kind of
Yep.
deconflict that situation as you go. Yeah.
Yep. So I think one of the questions that I had in mind, which I think you're partially already covered, but like in 2024, if you would have been the CISO with the experience that you have now, like, do you think you would have done anything differently?
Well, yeah, I think that is certainly a thing. What I just mentioned, also just acknowledging what I learned at Fitbit was getting vendors tactically and fast to solve a problem was really good. And solutions then started to become all cloud, and you
Yep,
still
yep,
had to talk to salespeople. And so anyway, I could turn services on, and then and just stop the funding. But that's leading to this point that I've learned a lot from other wiser people than me. But that market for lemons, because what I did find out is some vendors I chose and used, once we started really abusing the capability of the tool, it just wasn't doing what we wanted, and support, problems with support, leading to, this market for lemons that in 2024, there are so many vendors, so much technology. The vendors' features are all blending
yep,
and blurring as they need to increase revenue.
yep,
They have to seek other sources, and it's just a hard market. So
yep,
uh, it's very important for a CISO to understand that,
yep,
that to look down the future a little bit more. That once you get a vendor might say it does this, and that's good. Maybe it does do this, but then how's that going to fit into your enterprise? How you're going to integrate, et cetera, and sustain it.
yep,
But then the data that comes out of these tools, like what's the efficacy of them
yep,
truly? And then how are you aligning that and matching data with other parts of your organization?
yep,
Sometimes the data is not entirely representative of the current
yep,
situations.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for
And-
you, benchmarking also would be a little different because difficult, right? Because you were the first in the game. So, uh, so,
right.
yeah,
Yeah. And so on that note, that was one thing is, as part of the role is as we became listed, there are SEC rules. So I was, had to go to audit committee board meetings and, discuss and report and steer in a way the direction and capability of the security team. And there wasn't any way to say, hey, here's how to measure what an
yep,
IoT
yep,
company looks
exactly.
like.
Yes,
So
exactly.
I think, it became very apparent, early that I had to come up with a method to, one, not only describe what environment we were in, where we wanted, how much money did we want to spend effectively
Correct.
against what types of adversaries. So were we worried about nation states? No, but I had to communicate to the board that we're pretty much worried about organized criminals. And
Correct.
it was like at Fitbit, the security team would predict the future quite often, if
Nice.
not all the time. And the way to do this, though, for an IoT company was to separate it, obviously, into those areas of how you get a device out, and then how do you support the customer. So that's down to the physical component manufacturer. So the security of that area. So we made the Fitbits in the same, component manufacturers that Apple would make devices for at that point in time. And so you had threats there, and that's because you're burning firmware secrets into the devices on the factory line. So then there's actually the firmware itself,
Yep.
and the cloud and corporate security. There's compliance, and application, product security, all this type of stuff, operation security. And then, how do you measure that? And I think this is probably a debate for the ages. Some methods of reporting to the board are very, very data driven and quantitative. Like, here's our number of vulnerabilities, here's the total number of assets, and all of that. One, there's no time to do that. In that, to build out some of that instrumentation, would have mean we have to slow down in other areas
Correct.
to build up some of this compliance stuff. So in some way, they had to trust me, which they became to trust. That relationship was all good.
Correct.
Showing that, hey, here's where we want to be with the component manufacturing level security. We don't want to be at number 5, we want to be at 3. So using covert, like capability and maturity approach. You know, the measures the repeatability of processes. So
Nice.
can you do a process again? Like if you need to do a process again, you know, is it going to be more efficient? What types of automation do you have? Or you have to do this process the same way every time? And so utilizing that type of ethos and mentality, it's measuring how mature we were in component manufacturing, firmware security, AppSec, cloud,
Nice.
infrastructure, platform, corporate, and just setting targets of where we should be.
Nice.
Where and we all agree that when we first present this model, and my role is every 3 months is just to measure where we're going, and it's subjective. I think all information security is subjective. All of this type of stuff. So that was good, and it was a good way for me to not only communicate to people who make decisions in the company, but to set to keep me and the team realistic as well, where to focus, when not to focus on certain things. And it's interesting, just learning from going over there, and anyone who's been and done this will know exactly what I'm talking about, is the surprising initial lack of focus on enterprise corporate controls versus protecting the customer product revenue generating, specifically the customer revenue generating assets. And it's a nice juggling act you need to do along the way to fix all that stuff, because ultimately we all know it can affect production
Fascinating
security.
stories, man. Usually it's a 10-minute podcast, but but I think
Sorry.
we are getting such no, we are getting some interesting insights. So that's why I didn't want to stop you. So the last question that I have, and you can take your time, for young security enthusiasts, I think you've covered most of the areas. But how should I build my skills if I want to work in today's next generation smart devices, and which are coming a lot, and also in these areas? So what should I do as a security enthusiast? What would you recommend?
Look, it's a complex world out there. I think don't underestimate how kind of hard it is, and be kind to yourself.
Okay.
And just keep it simple. Go to a place called IOT Security 101, GitHub place, GitHub account, and in there's a whole background and what I could elaborate on, and actually that's much better than what I could do. But also then get yourself maybe a device, as a crappy device where something's already been researched, has a write-up on it, and then you can go and practice, read through all that IoT security stuff, practice on a device, and and find some, like, what fascinates me with IoT, I think, is sometimes I like a bit of the SDR and just the way that it does communicate with the real world. So you're going to have some sort of Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, SDR component. So probably jump into that. I've been looking at a bit of GNU radio lately, after looking at some posts from Elcam Tough and Michael Zalewski, who people who are interested in like SDR or very complex mathematics should have a look at.
Oh, definitely. So Sasha, actually, I wanted to speak to you for more half an hour, because you gave some interesting insights, and actually I was loving this conversation. So thanks for your time. Thanks. Sorry for taking your extended time, but thanks for being so kind as always.
Look, thank you. Thanks for reaching out and staying in touch. It's very nice of you.
Yeah, no worries.